Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Mia. If you're new here, this is where we share our daily highs and lows and talk about how we're navigating life and our marriage with God's guidance every step of the way.
Today's episode is going to be a hot topic. It's all about how to handle criticism,
Yeah.
staying calm during conflict, and staying united as a couple.
Yeah.
We're going to dive into the four horsemen of the apocalypse from the Gottman Institute.
Yeah, so essentially what all that means is number one, we'll talk about how to recognize the four horsemen in your relationship, what they are, what that means. Second to that is how to respond with love instead of letting conflicts escalate. And then lastly, we'll close with some biblical principles and practical strategies to help you guys remain united even when things are tough.
Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be a real honest conversation.
Yeah.
So let's get started.
All right, so first off, let's talk about the four horsemen of conflict, which are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. These are patterns that, according to the Gottman Institute, can destroy your relationship, your marriages, if unchecked. If you have all four of these going on for a prolonged period of time, it's unsustainable, and that's how they detect divorce rates.
Yeah, exactly. In the book, the 7 principles for making a marriage work, he goes over, basically observing couples in his love factory. I think that's what he calls it, or love
It's like
lab.
a lab or something.
Yeah. Basically, he just brings couples in, he sits them down, and he just observes them.
Yeah.
And he could say, within, I think it's, the first half hour.
Yeah.
If he sees contempt, he can predict divorce.
It's like when they argue, the way that they argue, the way that they speak to each other, he's able to predict whether or not their marriage will end in divorce.
Yeah, and it's absolutely wild. He's got, I think it's a 98% accuracy or something.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right, and we've definitely seen all four in our own marriage at different times, different fights.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, criticism is probably what I lean towards the most, like when I'm focusing on what you're doing wrong instead of focusing on addressing the issues.
Right, and there's been plenty of moments where I'm just guilty of just being defensive.
Yeah.
Instead of owning my own part, I often will just make excuses and just try to, flip the script and put all the blame back on you. No, I didn't do that. It's your fault.
Yeah, and don't forget stonewalling, because that's your classic silent treatment move when things get overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely done that. Defensiveness and stonewalling are probably my top two.
Yeah, whereas for me, criticism and contempt are probably my big two, but with that being said, don't misunderstand. There might be things that one of us tends towards, but I feel like we've both definitely been guilty of doing each of these at some point in another.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's talk about contempt.
Yeah.
Because that one can be the most destructive.
Yeah, I agree.
The contempt is when you start treating your spouse with disdain and just complete disrespect. And that looks like sarcasm, eye rolls, or just cutting remarks that really cut deep.
Yeah, it's true. Proverbs 15:4 says, "A gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit." And contempt really breaks the spirit, and it makes unity and reconciliation essentially impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. And the problem with contempt is it also can form a bad habit.
Yeah.
And you can get stuck in a loop of contempt.
Yeah.
But the good news is recognizing these patterns can be the first step in actually breaking them.
Yeah.
So once you see the horsemen show up, just choose to respond differently.
Yeah, 100%. So, how do we handle conflict without letting these patterns take over? One thing that has helped us is remembering that we are on the same team.
Yeah, that is huge. When you're in a disagreement, it is so easy to see your spouse as the enemy.
Yeah.
Well, Ephesians 4:3, it reminds us to make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace.
Yeah, so at a Marriage Express, which is a seminar that they do at our church, they taught us that Jesus is our source, the devil is our enemy, and our spouse is actually our companion. So we're going to go way into depth on that on tomorrow's episode.
Yeah.
But for today, practically, what does that mean? That means slowing down, listening, responding with love. For example, if I catch myself being critical, I'll try and reframe it. I'm having critical thoughts, before you even open your mouth, instead of saying, hey, you never help around the house. I mean, first off, you always want to be with the I statements. I've been feeling overwhelmed. Could we figure out a plan to tackle the chores?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that helps a lot especially with me, in getting defensive. I've learned to really just pause. take a breath and ask myself, is there any validity to what Mia is saying?
Yeah.
And instead of getting defensive, I'll just try to say outright, like, you're right. I could have done that better. And and that's hard to sit there and it takes a lot for me to swallow my pride and being because I'm very much, hey, I did that right. Like, there's nothing I could have done better.
Yeah.
But that's selfish, and that's only thinking about myself.
Yeah.
So again, taking that breath and being like,
I think just another thing to that point is we often will have the conversation about how something might be good, but we can be better, and how we can't settle. Because I feel like often it's like, well, I just want to get to a place that's good. And it's like, well, no, we want to get to a place that's like Jesus. We want to be reflecting Jesus in the way that we behave, in the way that we act. And that's where you kind of have to change your mindset too. It's not just about us and our happiness, but about holiness and reflecting God. So while something might be good, and it's not that you're necessarily doing something wrong, but if it's not something where you and your spouse are on the same page and you could do something better to be better reflecting Christ in your relationship, better reflecting sacrificial love, unconditional respect in your relationship, it's like doing these little small changes could completely de-escalate conflicts and just really create space for communication and for your relationship to develop to a place where God intends for you to be.
Absolutely. It's not like the movies at all. Where it's like, the guy gets the girl at the end of the movie and they ride off to the sunset. The movie's over and life's great. It's like, no, life is a scale. It moves and you slide up and down the scale day in, day out.
Yeah.
One of the key points, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, was never underestimate the power of prayer. When tensions are high, when life's going on and things are crazy, what I feel like has helped me, and I think it's helped you too, is just learning to pause. And that's kind of like a big theme around here, is just take a break, take a beat.
At this point I can't even count how many times we've said prayerful pause. We're just gonna rename the podcast.
Yeah, and that's and pray.
Yeah.
Even if it's just silently, ask God for wisdom. Ask God for, self-control.
Yeah, God, give me wisdom. Right. Give me self-control.
Ask God to, tame your tongue.
Yeah. Yeah. Staying united during conflict is about so much more than just avoiding the four horsemen. It's about actively choosing unity, actively choosing to be your best self, actively choosing to be like Jesus. Yeah.
And, one of the things that we both started doing is after a disagreement or after a fight, we'll come back in and we'll just check on each other. Yeah. Hey, are we good? And some days, the answer is no.
Nope.
And it's either maybe we just need, to keep talking and get to the bottom of it. Some days it's no, you need to give me space. Yeah. And I need 5 to deal with, you're doing too much.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's it's none of that. And it's just hey, we can't come together on a topic and we need to bring somebody else in.
Yeah, some biblical guidance.
Absolutely. You want solid advice. You want, good advice.
People that are going to be pointing you back to Jesus. Yeah, you don't want to be getting advice from your girlfriends or your guy friends who aren't saved or who are going to give you 100% secular advice. You want to be finding people in your life that you can go to hey sis, I'm struggling with this happened with Nate, and someone who's going to not just be looking for the tea or the drama, but someone who will be hey, remember, women, we're supposed to have gentle spirits. Do you think that you could have been a little bit more gentle? Someone who, whether you're right or wrong, is going to give you truth and grace, and not just that ride or die that's just going to be you're right.
So
no.
That ride or die perfectly sums up relationship with parents. Some of the best advice I've been given. Yeah. Do not tell your mom and dad everything. Yeah. Do not go to your mom and dad. Do not go to your siblings. The best advice is if you have to sit across from them at Thanksgiving, don't go to them with all your drama that's going on in your marriage. Because most parents, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but most parents take the side of their child.
Yeah, most of the time.
So it's kind of hard to differentiate, hey, I'm just venting, and I'm just upset at my wife right now. I just need to vent to my mom, my dad, whoever who's going to listen. Mm-hmm. And now next week we're at a birthday party, and now they're sitting across from, my spouse. Right. A little awkward.
Yeah, so I mean, on this podcast, we're being so honest. We're trying to be open. Like, we fight too, obviously. We're not perfect, but for me, it's about letting go of the need to win. Like, unity is so much more than just being right. And one of the verses that we read at our wedding was, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility. Value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interest of others.
Yeah, that's good. Another strategy is just reflecting back on the argument or the disagreement, and afterwards, kind of like, in football, on Saturdays after Friday Night Lights, like Saturday we did game day footage, and we walked back and we watched like how we did, and like that's the same thing you can kind of apply to your marriage. Like after a fight, after a disagreement, just like how did we do?
Yeah.
Did we handle that with grace, and did we handle that with the power of God in us, or did we handle that like my wife is my enemy and I want to win this argument?
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you're thinking, that sounds hard, it is. But practically speaking, this whole reflection thing, this might happen the next day, it might happen the next week, or if you're able to get over it a little bit quicker, it could be an hour. But mostly it's when we're good and the situation is over and settled. Like, obviously, we're not perfect, but by leaning on God and just remembering our principles and the foundation of our marriage, we've definitely seen real growth in reflecting on, hey, did we honor Jesus in that conversation? Like, were we reflecting a good Christian marriage to those around us, those that can hear us when we were having that discussion?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a firm believer, and like we've witnessed this.
Yeah.
If you take the time, it might take a week.
Yeah.
It might take a month. But as you progress, it's almost like a muscle that you have to build. And as you build it, like, it will get easier.
Yeah.
And those, things that would have taken weeks to get over, now they'll take hours. Maybe they'll take minutes.
Right. So, I mean, here's the bottom line. Conflict is inevitable, but how you handle conflict can either strengthen your marriage or tear it apart.
Absolutely. I mean, key is recognize the 4 horsemen, hopefully early.
Yeah.
Respond with love, and just ultimately choose unity. And above all, lean on God for wisdom.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, we'd love to hear how you guys are navigating conflict in your relationships. Definitely reach out to us below in the comments. You could also send me a private message on Instagram at Mia Ashman. We would love to connect with you guys.
Right, and I just want to say thanks for listening to the Desert and Garden podcast. Until next time, walk in love.
Live with purpose.
And trust God in every desert and garden.